5,000 or 6,000 years ago, we basically allowed the world to move through us without asking, without questioning. Yeah? And at around the time that we call the incarnation of Lucifer or the Yellow Emperor, what happened is that we began to feel ourselves within ourselves in a way that brought up selfishness in a way that had never been before. And about that time we began to build walls so that cities were separated from the environment. We no longer drifted with the seasons, yeah? But we separated ourselves. And we began to cut into the earth and plant things rather than just harvesting them. Yeah? And when we plant ideas in ourselves, the world changes. So in Rocky Valley, you'll find a carving hidden behind against a wall. There's a couple of carvings about this big of basically a cross with 7 looped circles around it. It's like a maze. It's a what do they call it? Not a maze, but a labyrinth. Thank you very much. Yes, and you find these wherever people have begun to connect their center with their environment. So these circles are the planets moving around us, the 7 circles in this labyrinth, yeah? And the 7 planets engender life in us. They constantly flow life, movement, change, development in us. This is why we have 7 days in the week. Yeah? Because these 7 processes that are in Steiner's most basic exercise, chapter 4 of Knowledge of the Higher Worlds, lead you through 7 basic processes. And if you go through those on a regular basis, just a little bit of observation of each one each day of the week, you'll find that the processes of development in your life really begin to flow. Stagnation falls away and stuff begins to work. Yeah? So, in the west of Europe, we had this, the Celtic type peoples, the seaboard peoples, really began to see the nature forces as beings, in the sense that you separate then, instead of just flowing with, you say, there's my God, yeah, this is my God. And for some of them, the forest beings encircled them. Yeah, so you have Cernunnos in the Celtic area, yeah, and this wherever you look, Cernunnos is working for you. And the herbs that heal and the trees that support and the beings that run in the woods, they're all part of this circle of life that surrounds us. But tribe is warring tribe, family is warring family, and the question is, where's that taking us? And then apparently around 3,000 years ago, we get the foundation of a type of circle that brings this question into the social environment, brings it out of nature into the social environment. Yeah. And you get the foundation of the round table as a spiritual stream, and this man that we call King Arthur as the center of the round table, the focuser, the one who carries the impetus of knowing where to go, what to do, when. And he's supported by these 12 people, each of whom brings one of the forces of the zodiac as an advisor and as an operative. And so he will consult his round table as equals, and he will offer or appoint tasks according to the relationships between the task and the 12 signs of the zodiac. So these powers that stream in from the 12 hold us and create structure in a similar way as the powers that flow in from the 7 create movement and development. And in the space between those two, we can really find the circles that support us. This is us. Yeah? We find ourselves as I within myself. But if we think twice, we also notice how we find ourselves as I in my environment. I am my occupation. I am my circle of friends. I am the way I arrange the things in my house. I am the things that I do in time. Yeah? So I am the circle that surrounds me as much as I am the center within me. So the dot in the center and the circle around is of course the image of the sun. Yeah? So we have the sun in the human heart, and our peripheral awareness of ourselves, which normally we don't notice because we do things when we're doing things, and that's when we're in our circle, and when we think about things we come to the center, and that's where we're in. Yeah. So what I'm wanting to point to is that the circle is us and we are the circle. And this individuation of the astral body that began with the incarnation of Lucifer, this idea that I am me, maybe it didn't begin with them, but this is a key point in it. This idea that I am me is something which we've now got to the point where we can begin to let go of and realize that I am my community, I am my environment, I am my circle of life. Yeah? And if I only think of myself as the line, the uprightness in my spine, then I remain at distance and eventually at war with my environment. Yeah? So this re-enlivenment of the sense of self until it becomes the flow that moves through me, into and out of me, rather than the center that I identify as. That's then... So when we experience ourselves in our environment, we are experiencing the Father creating us. When we experience ourselves within ourselves, we are experiencing the Son awakening as us. And when we find ourselves as the space between me and you, and the space between me and what I do, we are finding the Holy Spirit. The blood moves in circles around the body. The air comes into us and out of us and then circles the entire globe. And then it comes into us and out of us again. We are a circle. So this work that began in the mists that I don't understand fully, this work of bringing the circle into the round table, taking it from the environment, and beginning to create this question of equality within culture, was something that apparently was very strong here. Ara has seen some beautiful things. Steiner, after his visit to the island, was really astonished. He came back to Torquay filled with a new enthusiasm. And he wrote to his supporters at the Goetheanum, to Albert Steffen particularly, "We come from the castle ruins, eloquent. Here dwelt the demon conquerors of old." Yeah, these are the tasks that Arthur works with, perceives and sets through his circle of 12. Yeah? The demon slaying refers to going out into culture and helping people to find ways of life that cultivate community rather than following the demons in the astral body that awaken particularly with our identification as self. Yeah? So demon slaying is this social activity, the demon conquerors of old. Their leader's strength through the zodiac enhanced. The castles are now in ruins and the starry world grows dumb. Yet spirit power surges around the mount. And we can take yet there, not as just meaning but also still. Yeah? So spirit power surges around the mount, and mighty images of soul storm in from the sea. Another translation of that is, the strength to mould our soul comes storming from the sea. And the play of light and air rings magic changes. Really notice this, you know, the way the light falls into the water and the water brightens up, the way the light falls through the rain or the wind in patches, and you know, and the way when we sit out the front here, the light bathes us. Yeah, you go just a few yards from here and the wind is howling past you in a different way. So the light is very special. And if you get down into the cave, it's very likely you'll be able to see the way the light works. It's a slightly curved cave, and the mist that comes in from the crashing waves and the light works beautifully together. The play of light and air rings magic changes. When you breathe these things in, they become inspiration in you. Yeah? Those things that the clairvoyants among us can see as identifiable things still work in us if we can't see them. They work in us as creative forces if we allow ourselves, just for a moment, to breathe in the light. The play of light and air rings magic changes which strongly penetrate the soul anew, even today after 3,000 years. And from the memory pictures in the elements, we send you love-filled greetings in loyal cast of mind. Yeah? So that's all here. That will work in us. Yeah? Ara particularly can help us to image what is happening, but it is happening in us all the time. So this coming in from Cernunnos to the circle of knights. Yeah. Perhaps I'll say a little bit more, just a little bit more. On the island, the castles that you go through to go across the bridge and come into at the other side, they were connected at one point. In the 14th century, there was a land bridge across there, and it was famously said that if 3 good soldiers were holding that bridge, a whole army couldn't cross. Yeah, it was that narrow. Yeah. And now that's all washed away and there's bridges there. But the castle you come into, those are still 14th century. But if we go on and down on the right, there's some stuff which is believed to be at least 5th century. So, you know, 900 years older than that. And the archaeological suggestion is that this was actually quite a palatial place. So it may well have been Arthur's court. We don't know. Yeah? But the activity that's still visible in the atmosphere there to those I mention, I'm talking from, that really shows the point that this wrestling with the dark and the light in the human soul, yeah, has been happening here for thousands of years, and not just 3,000, more. Yeah, when those carvings in Rocky Valley are about 5,000 years old, and it seems that the Drotten mysteries have been about 5,000 years as people begin in the first awakening. Our leaders awaken not just to self, but to this question: how do we deal with this self? And that's our question now as we go forward with the new technology, because it's the self that holds the answers and the monsters. Yeah. And we need to, I'll leave that just there for the moment, the self. Yeah. And this softening of the self, this circle and the center and the circle and the breathing between the center and the circle. So Cernunnos into the Knights of the Round Table, and in the cave, there are, in a couple of places, ledges near the entrances, and it would seem that the knights used to spend a night on those ledges to wrestle with. And it won't just be the wind and the light and the spray and the fear of death as the storms crash. Ara pointed out as we went into the cave that when you get to the point where the sand is just about to become as high as it gets, as the cave just begins to drop and the roof comes in, there's a place there where you get connected to the zodiac. Now, normally when we connect to the zodiac, we can feel the 12 forces, advisors, moving in and holding us. But in that place, Ara says, you can actually go out through to these directions instead of just receiving in. And I lay there on one of those for a few minutes, and I got some feeling of that, how channels of light offer like spokes outwards to whatever. So just watch that, see what happens as you come into the cave. And then as you crest the sand and begin to go down again, that transforms. And again, quoting my friend Ara, with his permission, you come to the place where the 7 are working. Yeah? And the 7 are most easily identified by the planetary beings, archangels, forces, characters, however you like to see that. Yeah. So if you get a chance to do that, feel into that and notice. So if both the 12 and the 7 are opening up in new ways in this which is called Merlin's cave, no wonder they've built a mystery centre or a holding place above that on the island. So the Round Table continued its work for a couple of thousand years, and around the 9th century, it would seem the Round Table came to a certain conclusion, and that's particularly visible in the Parzival mystery, the Parzival story. Yeah? And Parzival is about how the fool, from a noble background, finds himself desiring to get into his father's business. Yeah? And this is in all of us. Am I not a fool? You know? And through following the path to the Father, yeah, the circle, we come from our centre into this place where the relationship between the two unfolds. As Jesus got to the point at the Last Supper where he could say, the Father and I are one. Yeah? And when I go, I will leave you a comforter. Yeah? And this, the Holy Spirit is this space in which we can go from the centre to the circle consciously. The circle shines in on us, creates our centre, and when we move back, then we begin to create a meaningful relationship with the Holy Spirit, and community begins. So through Parzival, the Knights of the Round Table meet the Holy Grail. Yeah? And in the Holy Grail, the circle gets smaller again. Yeah? It's now a cup. Yeah? And the individual soul becomes the circle. So we no longer need 12 knights and the king. We now become the possibility of the circle ourselves. And the Holy Grail, the castle at Montségur was the last stronghold, and that was eventually taken over by the Catholics. And what was slipped out from there was taken preciously and given a new life, and we get where the Holy Grail was, we get the Rosy Cross. So again, the circle has become smaller, and the circle has now, it's beginning to transform. It's no longer a God, it's not community, it's not even the own soul. It's the possibility of spiritual transformation within the soul. Yeah. The circle becomes these 7 roses. The 7 is the process of transformation, and the rose is the purification of red, which in us is passion. So that brings us to now. Well, it brings us to the beginning of the 20th century anyway. And Rudolf Steiner offers this Rosicrucianism as a transformed impulse into so many areas of life. And one of the things that he did was the first Goetheanum. And in the first Goetheanum, he gives us a beautiful picture of the seven, the process of the seven. Yeah? So if we start with this one, they're normally given planetary names, but if you look closely at where the seven work in us, there are two ways of arranging them in relationship to the planets. So I've realized from this, now I'll just say a little bit more. The first way is kind of the eonic way. Yeah? Through the eons, the seven work, as we know, through Saturn, Sun, Moon, and so on. Yeah? In the human soul, they actually work as a birth and a growth process, beginning with Moon and going to Mars and Mercury and Jupiter and so on. Yeah? So the 7 days of the week are 7 transformational processes applied to the human soul if you start on Monday, and they apply to the structure within which the human soul works if you start on a Saturday. So what we have here is the upper and the lower, which it's hard to see it from this, but you can say that the lower is the active. So what happens is the cosmic all, the silence, divides itself into the active and the passive principle, the doing and the holding. Yeah? And the doing and the holding together create a space. They create an opening. They cooperate to create an opening. Yeah? The active going, right, and the passive going, yes. Yeah? And what happens from this is, there's a whole world in this. What I just want to point out is that first they create a space, and then the active moves and the passive comes to receive it, and you get this kind of womb form here, opening to receive the impulse of the active. So the passive really says, yes, I will gestate this for you. Yeah? And then in the third process, the active has found its identity as this 3 from the top. The active has found its identity, and the passive can withdraw a little bit and just say, okay, yeah. So you get a kind of a grail form here. Yeah, just a willingness to hold the space as the active begins its work. Now, what happens next is that the active takes over the whole space in order to really find itself. These 3 have now become heavy, fattened, maybe like overripe fruit. Yeah, the 3, and the whole space is taken over by the active, and the passive is just across the top here, at the very top, just kind of withdrawn and holding the space. And that's where we are now. We've forgotten about the gods. They are quietly waiting for us. We've taken over the whole world, yeah, and we're about to destroy it, the rotting fruit. And at that point, people begin to wake up. And what they wake up to is the fact that I am not a good person. Yeah? I am a blend of good and bad. And only when I stop trying to prove to everybody that I'm a good person and make them carry the weight of admitting that I'm a good person, yeah, only when we start to dance with the light and the dark within us. Yeah, so you have these two like snake forms, yeah, and they're eyeing each other up. Each one sees the other, yeah, and here we are holding our upright and dancing with the light and the dark within us. And when we begin to do this, everything changes. Until we begin to do this, we continue to destroy the world. Yeah? And when we say, yes, I wanted to be seen as a good person, but actually I'm just another human being. And I can dance with my selfishness. I can dance with my nastiness. I can dance with my brilliance. I can dance with the fact that I do make a contribution to the world. And I can dance with both of those, yeah, and hold the center. Yeah. And that's really as far as I want to take these 7 processes for the moment. The passive then goes, ah, there you are. Yes, I receive your dance. Yeah. This is where we are, moving across from the 4th stage, from the 4th stage into this 5th stage. Yeah. And when that happens, then we realize that the whole world is dancing. Yeah? And it doesn't matter whether it's a cloud or a tree or a cave or a blade of grass. Everything is dancing with its light and its dark. Yeah? And from another point of view, if we begin to look for where is the whole world dancing, yeah, and begin to look for the life within everything that we see and hold, then also our inner life begins to dance and frees itself from the prison of the false self-obsession into the dance. Yeah? So it's a two-way process where we begin to take a real interest in who is giving us this experience. Who is this slate? Yeah? Who is this piece of wood? That they're giving us this experience of solidity and holding up the fireplace for us and so on. Yeah? Everything is inviting us into relationship. And when we look for that relationship, we move out of the 4th stage into the 5th stage. And everything begins to move. And when we get these powers of recognition, if we don't take an interest in who they are, we become the sorcerer's apprentice, who discovers that the broom has being and says to the broom, oh, you go and fetch the water. Yeah? And so the broom makes this journey down to the river and back up and starts filling the cauldron for the spell he wants to do. And then he realizes the broom's taking the mickey out of him. And the broom's not going to stop, just keeps pouring water. And desperately he takes an axe and splits it in 2, and then there's 2 brooms fetching water and you know, flooding the space. This is what the technology will do for us if we don't take an interest in who it is. Yeah? So that's what we're doing here. That's what we're doing here. We're looking for, where can I find in me an interest in who these new technology beings are? You know, people are putting mRNA, they're putting AI out into the environment. They're putting what do they call them? Plants that have been modified, genetically modified organisms out into the environment. And they have a life of their own, like that broom. They have a life of their own. They're self-reproducing. It's not like putting a tractor or a smoking factory out. Yeah? These things, boom, they're off. They are changing our world. And we have to take an interest in who they are.
And our karma's linked with that as well. The machines we create.
Yes.
We link our karma to that.
Yes, indeed, indeed. Yeah. So, in the story of the Sorcerer's Apprentice, the answer only comes with the return of the Master. Yeah. So, when the Christ comes again, then everything is solved. And the numbers of churches and organizations and religions which are looking for the return of the Master as the solver out there is innumerable. Yeah? But the master, of course, lives in the heart. Yeah? And when we really recognize the Christ in us, and which we can only do when we recognize the Christ in the person in front of us, then we learn how to, or the broom ceases taking the mickey out of us. Yeah. So it all comes as a package: awakening to the beingness of nature, the offering of the Christ love through us to these beings of nature, and an interest in who they are and what they're doing. All comes as a package. Now, after his visit, Steiner's visit here to this island, back in Torquay, he said, "This path I laid out in Knowledge of the Higher Worlds, of awakening to the spiritual world, you can do that in reverse." He says, you don't have to go through imagination, inspiration, intuition. You can go straight into intuition. But the problem is that when you take that power of working from intuition straight away, you need something to help give you a check. Yeah? If you're going up through imagination, inspiration, intuition, you are working with these beings in a way that is much less direct. But if you're going straight into intuition, you need something to help you check the power that could arise from the old fourth stage. And that check is the friends in front of you. Yeah. So he described creating a circle of people who work together on their spiritual development. And all you need to do that is to accept that this whole circle is going at the path of the slowest. And if you think that person, that slowest person, is somebody else, then that circle isn't going to work. Yeah? Because we are all the slowest person. And there are moments when this person and that person and the other becomes the leader and the guide and the teacher. Yeah? So this circle, now having gone to the Rosy Cross, begins to expand again and becomes the circle of community. When you deliberately create a circle of friends who become each other's spiritual teachers. Yeah? Not that anybody is teaching the others, we're all confessing, we're all noticing where we are the slowest. Where are you the slowest? No, where am I the slowest? Yes, I listen to your problem, I listen to your problem, yeah? And together we hold the space into which the beings that hold the whole circle of the seven, the Saturn beings, come into the space between us, and they help us to elucidate, to pour light into our own karma and destiny, so that our karma becomes the other's teacher. Yeah? And I learn from your karma and your karma and your karma. And when we agree to work together, I can work on forgiving you, knowing that it's mutual. Yeah? Knowing that we're all struggling with this. So the circle, having come in, Sonanos, the round table, the Holy Grail, the circle of seven roses, the Rosy Cross, now becomes the circle of friends. As in the Goethe's fairy tale, where the most precious thing in the world is revealed not even to be gold. The most precious thing in the world is revealed to be conversation. In this circle, we find the truth that where two or three are gathered together in his name, there I find myself. There I find the true I. I am not Tobias. I am that which seeks to live as life through Tobias in the space around me. It's my job as Tobias to manage the space around me such that the I can live in this space.
The name Zarathustra was a title in honor of the original Zarathustra? Was Arthur a title? Was
Yes.
Arthur in the night something that lasted thousands of years?
Sorry, I didn't make that one clear. I took that as sort of understood. Yes, yes. That is the way my picture of it works, definitely. And yes, there probably was an Arthur originally, and there are different ways of taking that name in pronunciation, and some of them are quite interesting. Also connecting with Lord of the Underworld. Yeah, so you bring the light through this point and begin to illuminate the darkness. Yeah, so Arthur as the focalizer of this circle of 12, and each of the names of the knights that surrounded him as one of the representatives of the zodiac, each of those was a title. And many, many people went through that over that period from about 1000 BC to about 900 AD. And their role in ordering both nature and society so that there was the capacity for healing and developing the individual as a member of a community is profound. Isabel Wyatt's book on that is just beautiful. She's the real source. From Round Table to Grail Castle, the book is called, by Isabel Wyatt. And the research in that is wonderful, and the storytelling is beautiful. And she picks up the work of these knights to cross from this world into the other world, into the ethereal world, into the elemental kingdoms, in order to wrestle with the demons there, which were manifesting as shadows and darkness in human souls and in human communities. Yeah. So by bringing light, order, logos into Christ, in other words, into the elemental kingdoms, they protected and healed human communities. Yeah. Beautiful book. From Round Table to Grail Castle, and Wyatt is spelled W-Y-A-T-T, Isabel Wyatt. And the other wonderful source on what's happening here, again, immense research and deep perceptive understanding. You wonder just who Richard Seddon was, but Richard Seddon's book, Arthur at Tintagel, I think it's called, and somebody might correct me on that, just a wonderful research, really looking at the 12 signs of the zodiac and the 7 astral activities within the human being, and the activation of the chakras and their Celtic names and images that you find in Celtic iconography, which once you understand them are clearly depicting chakras. An excellent, really excellent book. Richard Seddon, Arthur at Tintagel. But that's, I slightly lost. Yes, no, I think we're done with that one, aren't we? Yes, good.
You mentioned a few steps from the circle inwards to a potential and then going outwards again.
Yes, yes.
How many steps did you, and could you repeat them?
Yes, sure. You know, I hadn't counted those steps, but you'll probably find that Cernunnos it represents the first stage, the moon stage, yeah, where we receive our spirituality from our environment. Yeah, and the Round Table would be the Mars stage, yeah, where we begin to venture into our environment with the desire to change it. So the moon stage you also see when a seed swells, ready to burst. Yeah, a seed has found its home, it's blown or whatever it's done, found its home, and it swells, and a gel appears around the seed. And then the Mars stage, the seed bursts and produces root and shoot. Yeah, so the Mars stage in the Round Table. And then we come to the Holy Grail, and that would be the Mercury stage, where we become aware of self. In the Mercury stage, my own experience is real. is the third exercise in the days of the week. Yeah, the first exercise is care of self. The second exercise, the Mars exercise, is an interest in the other, an acceptance that I am just one of others. And the third one is my experience is real. And the fourth stage then, which would be the Rosy Cross, is the responsibility for my inner life. And that's exactly, the Rosy Cross meditation is about awakening deep, Christ-like responsibility for my inner life. Yeah. And then the fifth stage would be this forming of the Saturn circle, the Saturn path, the circle of friends committed to spiritual development. And that's when we begin to dance with our own light and dark nature. Yeah. Thank you. I hadn't really made that connection. It's right there. It works. If anybody wants to follow up these exercises from chapter 4 in Knowledge of the Higher Worlds, I have got pages of commentary and specific ways of working with these exercises in the days of the week. And I'm very happy to dump that on anybody's email who wants it. They are beautiful. You know, and he almost dismisses them in Knowledge of the Higher Worlds. He's just talked about fascinating loads of exercises in chapter 3. And in chapter 4, he kind of says, oh yeah, well, before you do all that, just check you've got these 7 in place. And, you know, when I first read it, I went, yeah, okay, yeah, I've pretty much got those. Right, let's look at these exciting exercises. But when you come back and focus on each one of these for each day of the week, you find that the soul relaxes and deepens and you get grounded and development happens. Yeah.
What are the Drotten mysteries? This has been referred to a few times now.
I suppose my single sentence characterization would be that, which I gave already. Once the astral body is individualized, this question of where are my sources and how do I apply them from the spiritual world into this world.
Right, short, the Drotten mysteries, they are the first sort of the mysteries before the Druids. And they developed into the Druid mysteries later. But you might say they were the first mysteries of Western Europe, it seems, after Atlantis.
Thank you.
And they had 3 main centers, one in the White Sea, one in Norway, and one here.
What's the White Sea?
White Sea, Kola, the Kola, Norway, Finnmark, then you have Finland, and then you have the Kola that goes where the Russians have their military bases, submarine bases. And that makes the White Sea.
Uh-huh. Right. So then the Drotten mysteries are also in the Kalevala.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the epic that we know as the Kalevala describes the ventures of 3 heroes. So the formation of the 3.
Yeah.
Yes.
The 3 places, the 3 heroes, and the 3 was very prominent.
Yeah. There are 3 specific inlets in that sea.
So are we suggesting Tintagel itself is the place here, or is it Cornwall more generally?
I would say Cornwall. Yeah. At least half of it.
But you have those 4,000 or 5,000 year old rock carvings just a mile up here, where the water, does this into the land, and here the land does that into the water. So I would say it seems to me that there is a focal point of that here at Tintagel. But that's me.
All of these have a focal point and an area.
I mean, that's why I'm asking, because usually
in the White Sea, you have a group of islands that is called Solovetsky Island, Solovetsky, and Solovetsky, and all these islands were included in the Drotten mystery.
I don't know, what do you see when you look back to that?
Look back to what?
To those times? see the past?
Well, the first you see is actually four forms that defend it. It was actually sacred places that was not legal to go. So in where I live, there are rows of very old people with spears defending it. Now we were so happy actually in Sandefjord that this area was owned by a very rich man and he kept everybody out. So this, so it was sort of protected. He protected it. And today it's legal to go there. And a very interesting area. It's the elemental beings are very, very prominent there. They are huge. Even the fishers, when it gets a storm, they can see horses galloping there, horses that do not exist. Yes, very, and I had these labyrinths up to 1800 because then a farmer needed stones for the barn, so he took them. But I have been showing groups of anthroposophists from Norway around that area several times. And it is like being, it was a Swedish doctor that once commented, you know, here was the labyrinth, yeah, and there was where the high initiates was hiding or sitting. And he said, quite interesting, this is the first tourist guide who points to all these things who do not exist. So the drop mysteries are very protective and they concern very much the streams. They have the 12-foldness. They were occupied with 12. Also the 12 nights, the 12 zodiac signs. And they knew about the 12 streams of the body. And up to 1800, this labyrinth in where I live, it picturing all these streams. So when they walked in this labyrinth, they found that they had a better catch, fish catch, than if they didn't. And they could also stop storms with if they first had walked in this. So it was a control over the elements. In the drop mysteries, elements it was very important in those old times. To control over the prey, fish, animals. So you see that these are very old. It is almost like the Stone Age time. It actually is Stone Age time.
I mean, I'm struggling a little to connect this to what was a sort of, I think would probably wrongly be called the shamanic influence. Sort of Denisovan, further even to the east of the White Sea, that stretches across quite a large range of Siberia, where it feels as if that Atlantean spirit, if you like, though I don't think one can really... Atlantis to me is a hook that we're putting in to describe, I think, a level of consciousness. It was much more widespread than a physical place called Atlantis. But it feels to me as if there's been a sort of condensing of something that was much more widespread human consciousness of the innate order of how the elementals and the human and the physical work together, are condensing almost into those mystery centers.
Yeah. And when I get more and more convinced when they say that Atlantis will rise again, that actually it is this ability to interact with the elemental world, which now is starting. I think that is I think Atlantis rising, not some
Material.
physical sea bottom. It is the ability, the relationship then actually between the etheric body and the elemental body that also then create clairvoyance. That is for me Atlantis rising. And for me it is also probably the Cain and Abel merging, as Steiner said his obligation was to help. But that is false. I try to understand myself. I'm not really full understanding of that yet.
No, I think for me there's a clue in this imagination that, so Merlin has his rod. The question is that rod a magic wand? Or is it just a 2-meter measuring stick?
Measuring that.
But actually, so he has this ability
It's fun.
to direct armies by magic
Yeah.
to get to somewhere else. And actually, you develop that magic ability by understanding the geography and the geometry and the topology. And I think there is a sense of this coming in to what we now will sniff at as science. But actually at the time science was somehow pure magic. And so I think this notion that the magic wand is also just a ruler
Interesting.
feels to me like part of this human destiny of condensing out of this totally beautiful sense of the spirits within which we can do exactly nothing into the potency.
Prospero.
Sorry?
Prospero.
So that begs the question of Merlin, because you bring up magic and mounds. I think it's fairly, not easy, but approachable to get an idea of the 12 knights and the 13th with Arthur. But then who's Merlin in that picture? And is Merlin a helpful or a black magician? Who's Merlin in this story?
You know that,
Do I?
don't you?
No, I don't actually. At this moment, I couldn't give an answer.
Oh.
You could?
No, I thought you lived here, so
Right.
you
Yeah.
are a little Merlinish.
Gordon's got much more answers than I've got. Yeah.
Tell us about Merlin.
I'm not going to answer that. I'm going to respond with something else that Steiner said after his visit here, where so he goes back to Torquay, carries on with his lecture cycle, and he says something absolutely remarkable about Christianity. And he's talking about 2 streams of Christianity, one of which is owned by those of us, and I put myself in that camp, who connected to Christ before Christ's physical incarnation. And he describes how that is coming down from the north and the west. And then he's describing how those who have connected to Christ during and after his physical incarnation are coming up from the south and the east. So you've got this sort of Roman stream and you've got this northern stream. And one of us still holds the magic of the connection to the elemental sphere, and the other holds the magic of the connection to the warm heart Christ sphere. And these two actually meet in whatever the 8th century, and then we'll help me out here if it's not necessary. And I sense that Merlin has this role of being the vessel that carries that old pre-Christian knowledge and make sure that it isn't lost and forgotten by those who are being swept over by this Christian knowledge.
And he is the northern stream, yes.
Yes.
Merlin.
Yes.
Yeah, I think so. I think he's carrying that Because to me, you have to have both. I mean, I feel whenever it's speaking very, very personally, but when I meet that sort of, if you like, the Italian stream that's picked it up from the other side of the Mediterranean, if you like, and brought it up and through, there is something so sulphurous, so it's almost intangible. The clarity. This is why I think Merlin is both magician and scientist, because actually, and you can look at the Platonic and the Aristotelian people as being again those manifestations of the holding of this Goethean awake to physicality. And I think Merlin has something somewhere in there. Whilst Arthur is all off about crossing thresholds and going and saving humanity.
Thank you, Cosmo.
And you think then the northern stream is the Platonic?
I would say Aristotelian.
Aristotelian?
Yeah, I think.
Mm.
But again, those, if you like, are words that are hanging huge modern pictures to them, so we'd have to clarify what we mean.
Definitely there is a northern stream, especially in there today. With Vidar as the new guardian of the threshold, which is a northern stream. And it's coming now, today, strong. And before that has been more the southern stream.
Can I finish up?
Oh, you're not finished?
No, what? We've got the circle. And we've got the straight line, the strings, yeah? And the straight line is the northern stream or the cosmic masculine or whatever you like, and the circle as the other one, yeah? So easily come into conflict. And to bring the straight line and the circle into harmony, it's magic when that happens, yeah? And somehow these things are working magic. The NHS has been my main customer, you know, and chains of care homes have bought dozens of them. And the head of music therapy research at Cambridge University said, wherever one of these comes into the picture, the whole thing gets deeper. Yeah. Hospitals right across the world, including Borneo, for heaven's sake, you use these. So there is something quite magical happening here. And the acoustic curve inside there is a Fibonacci spiral, which is the same as you see in the pattern of seeds in a sunflower head, for example. Yeah. And the spiral is the relationship between the circle and the straight line. Yeah? If you try and unwind a circle, you create a spiral. Yeah? If you take a straight line and offer it circularity without breaking it, it'll take up a sort of a spiral form. Yeah, there is, and this Fibonacci spiral turns out to have extraordinary acoustic properties. It amplifies the harmonics within sound. If you take various other amplifying shapes, they'll amplify it in a direction, or they'll amplify one note, and this one amplifies all the notes, and it amplifies the harmonics within them. So you get an extraordinarily rich overtone series, which is the hidden maths within sound. It's the personality, it's the colour of sound. Yeah. So this is something which I've been given to serve this time round, and they are going around the world causing healing. And here we have a relationship, a harmonious relationship between the straight line and the circle. And that's, in a sense, it's an archetype for all of us. And one last thing, any sound that comes into these is qualitatively changed. You can hear how the quality of my voice is changed if I speak like this or if I speak like this. Yeah? Yeah? And that has to do with the power of listening while carrying both the straight line and the circle. So this spiral does that to sound. And if any I, opens the I self to really receiving the other into the soul without losing its self, something healing happens. The quality of listening. Thank you.
No.
Oh, yes. And then also, there are very, very few instruments made from one continuous piece of wood. The vast majority of instruments are built up out of lots of little bits. So the quality of the tree is allowed to speak through the instrument because it's one continuous piece of wood. And if you compare the sound of walnut with the sound of cedar, you can feel into the difference between the wood of a broadleaf tree and the wood of a needle-leaf tree. And the wood, the cedar that rushes up, and especially the Lebanon cedar with its level branches, and the cross-like uprightness to it, such that it was reputed to have been the wood from which the cross was made. It's also the first tree to be mentioned in literature. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, the Lebanon cedar has a big place. And it's both softer and somehow fuller.
That sound good.
There's just one that I'd love to share with you. In English, yeah, what happens with the vowels in English? Just notice, of course, that when we say ah, everything is wide open. And as we start closing from the back, I, o, yeah, it kind of brings us forward. Yeah. Now, if, in English, I is how we say I. Yeah. So I, the word for self, comes from the back to the center. And if we say eo, come to the front, we get eu. So the word for the person in front of us comes from the center and goes forward. Yeah. And if you start forward and come back to center, you get we. Yeah. I, you, we.